Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with Chicago deep dish pizza. That's right, we're going to be throwing pizza pie down like they do in Chi-Town. And while I'm not able to officially admit I like this kind of pizza, since I'm originally from New York, but unofficially, once in a while as a change of pace, I really enjoy it. And really, all kidding aside, it's kind of silly to compare the two styles and argue about which one's better, since they are so drastically different from each other. Of course, having said that, people will continue to argue, which is fine, especially since the New York style is better. But anyway, I'm still very excited to show you this technique. And we'll begin with our Chicago deep dish pizza dough, which begins like all our other pizza doughs, with some warm water into which we're going to sprinkle our yeast. And after letting it dissolve for about 10 minutes or so, we'll go ahead and add the rest of the ingredients, which will include some olive oil, as well as some melted butter, which is one of the two ingredients that differentiates this from regular pizza dough. We're also going to need to add in some salt, as well as some sugar. And then the second ingredient that makes this dough unique, some cornmeal. Oh yeah, we're going to throw in some yellow cornmeal. And then we will finish this off with our flour. But as you know, we always hold a little bit back, since it's always easier to add flour to a too wet dough than it is to add water to a dry dough. And then we'll grab our dough hook and start kneading this, and continue to knead it until we've created a very soft, very smooth, relatively elastic dough. And if you are using a machine for this, it's always a good idea to stop it once in a while and scrape down the sides. And after doing that, as well as possibly adding a little more flour, like I said, we'll continue to knead this for 3 or 4 minutes or so until that dough pulls away from the sides and forms something that looks a little something like this. Okay, like I said, very soft, very smooth, but elastic. And at this point, let me go ahead and transfer that onto our work surface so you can get a better look. And besides just wanting to touch this because it feels super good, I'm also checking here to see if it might need some more flour. And if it does, we can just knead in a little bit from the work surface. But this was feeling just about perfect, which in that case, we will simply form it back into a ball and then transfer it back into our mixing bowl into which we've dripped a little bit of oil. And we'll sort of flop that around and give it a little rub until the surface is coated. And that is going to be pretty much it for dough production. We will simply cover this and leave it in a warm spot until it doubles in size, which is generally going to take between an hour and 2 hours. And one thing we can do while we're waiting is go ahead and make our pizza sauce. And what you see here is a double batch of our famous Food Wishes pizza sauce. And you're going to want to let it reduce a little. All right, we want to simmer our sauce until it's nice and thick like this. All right, that is one of the keys to Chicago-style pizza. Okay, we don't want a thin, watery sauce. But anyway, while our dough is rising, we'll go ahead and get our sauce together. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and fast forward and take a look at what my dough looked like about an hour and a half after I started. And we can see here it's definitely doubled in size and looking like something that really wants to get poked down with our fingers. That never gets old. And then what we'll do once that's deflated is go ahead and transfer it onto a floured work surface. And we will start pressing that out into some sort of round shape, using just enough flour to keep it from sticking to the table and our hands. And while you could roll this, it should be soft and supple enough to stretch into the shape we want. And since I'm going to bake this in a 12-inch cast iron skillet, I'm going to try to stretch this dough about 3 or 4 inches bigger than that. And then once that's been accomplished, we can go ahead and transfer this into our pan. But before we do, we're going to brush it generously with olive oil. And like I said, I'm using a 12-inch cast iron skillet, which I find works very well for this. But don't worry, if you don't have one of these, there are other options that will work. And then once our pan's been prepped with olive oil, we can go ahead and transfer in our dough. And we'll go ahead and place that in. And then sort of stretch and pull it so it's evenly distributed across the bottom, as well as on the sides. And then if we want, we can go around and trim off all the excess dough, or eventually fold it over our fillings and bake it like that, which is generally the approach I use. But we'll get to that in a minute. For now, let's just go ahead and proceed with our fillings. And we will start with our cheese. And for this, we're going to be using 3 kinds. We're going to do some sliced provolone, as well as 2 kinds of mozzarella. We have the fresh kind, which is kind of soft and moist and very milky, as well as your standard cheap, firm, supermarket-style mozzarella, which they refer to in the business as low-moisture mozzarella. And what we'll do is go ahead and start with our provolone, and we'll lay some slices over the bottom. And then we'll follow that by scattering over our fresh mozzarella that we've cubed up or broken into small pieces. And then once our pizza pie has been fresh mozzarellaed, it's time to add about a pound of hot Italian sausage, which is hopefully you can see is still raw. And you can sometimes buy that in bulk, but generally we just remove the casings from some links. And then once that's set, we'll go ahead and top it with our firm, cheap supermarket mozzarella. I'm sorry, low moisture mozzarella. And then once that's been evenly sprinkled over, we will top all this with our hot pizza sauce. I know, it's kind of crazy. The sauce goes over the toppings in Chicago pizza. And again, please note how thick the sauce is. All right, so whether you're buying your sauce or you're making it from scratch, you're definitely going to want to reduce it a little bit to dry it out and thicken it up. So we will go ahead and generously ladle that over the top. And then what we'll do to finish this off is take a couple ounce piece of Parmesan and freshly and finely grate that over the top. And if you're thinking, I bet the fake Parmesan would work perfectly here. No, it actually won't. Get a hunk of some real Parmigiano Reggiano. But anyway, we'll go ahead and generously grate that over the top. At which point we have to decide what to do with our excess dough. And our choices would be go around trimming it all off, and maybe saving it to make some breadsticks or something. Or if you want, you can simply go around folding it over the toppings like this. And then once that bakes, we're going to get a nice big wide rim of crust all the way around. And by the way, the center of this piece is going to come out the same no matter which method you use. So that's just going to be personal preference, and we'll leave that up to you. I mean, you are, after all, the Krusty the Clown of how much crust goes around. But personally, because of the way this pizza is constructed, I think having some extra crust around comes in handy. And then once that's set, we need one last thing before this goes in the oven, and that's a little drizzle of olive oil that we'll apply all the way around on the crust, as well as drizzling a little bit over the center. And that's it, our Chicago deep dish pizza is finally ready to bake. So let's go ahead and transfer that into the center of a 425-degree oven for about 35 minutes or so, or until it's beautifully browned and looks like this. Oh yeah, that looks pretty good. And we really do want to make sure we push the envelope on the browning of the top. And it should sound like this when you scrape it with a fork. As well as have kind of a hollow sound if you tap on it. So that is looking and sounding perfect. And I'll finish up by garnishing with a little extra freshly grated Parmesan, as well as a little touch of Italian parsley, which, by the way, as anyone from Chicago will tell you, counts as one serving of vegetables. And then normally you'll want to try to let this sit for about 10 minutes or so before you cut a slice. But I didn't. I cut one right away. And for a first slice, it came out really well. But it was so hot, it kind of spread out. And I didn't like the pictures. So I waited about 10 more minutes and cut another one, and topped it with a little bit of parsley and took a few pictures before it was time to grab a fork and go in for a taste. And for something that's really closer to a casserole or a lasagna than it is to a pizza, I really do enjoy this. Right, that provolone and mozzarella have kind of fused to the bottom crust, with everything being topped by that tomatoey, sausagey, cheesy goodness. And above and beyond the completely different construction, what makes this deep dish style pizza so unique is that butter and cornmeal in the crust. It really does add something extra special that you don't get in your normal pizza eating experience. And while I did a fairly standard cheese and sausage version here, this is really more of a technique video, since any and all of your favorite pizza toppings can be included here. And speaking of fillings, because a deep dish does contain so much of them, that's why I like to leave that excess dough attached, so I can mix in some of that extra crust where and when I see fit. But anyway, that's it. A former New Yorker's take on Chicago deep dish pizza. As I mentioned earlier, we shouldn't be arguing about which style of pizza is better, and instead celebrate the fact that we're able to enjoy both. Whether it's this delicious deep dish version, or the obviously far superior New York thin crust. So I really do hope you give this a try soon. Head over to foodwishes.com for all the ingredient amounts and more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.